Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you everyone for being here this morning after our very full day yesterday. I'm going to present work that is tied to what Anke has presented, and actually it's drawn on some of her research, and my debt towards people like Anke, Marina, and Helmut is really important. I approached this as a political economist interested in integrating strongly a material dimension to my research. I worked for, let's say, at least a decade and a half. Actually, me and Sandrine did our PhD together ways back at this laboratory called CEPREMAP, which was a place where the regulation school in France, l'École de Régulation, with Boyer, Glietta, and others, were based. And I did my PhD with Boyer on classical two-sector political economy. You'll understand what I mean by that in a few seconds, where there was no materiality at all to the analysis we were doing. We were looking at basically monetary flows and social relations around monetary flows. And around 2010, I had been doing a lot of research, embedded or action research, we say in French, with the labor movement to try to debunk austerity and I kept on doing these presentations on showing how the crisis emerged and how states, by reacting through austerity, were amplifying the economics effects of the global financial crisis. And then I ended up having this kind of pro-growth. Growth will get us out of the problem. And I was really troubled by what I was saying all the time. And at the same time, I was looking more and more towards what was happening in the tar sands, in Quebec's northern part, where we saw, I didn't start my timer, mining was starting, and as an answer to the crisis, reprimarization was not only a fact, it was a policy in North America, and especially in Canada, and even in Quebec, which is an economy that's more torn towards renewable energy and towards biomass than towards, we don't have much fossil fuels. Reprimarization was actually a political project to get us out of this economic slowdown post 2008 financial crisis, even though the economic slowdown had been caused by austerity policies that the government had set up. So struggling through all these concepts, I said, I really have to rethink the way I do political economy, and that brought me to degrowth politically, and it brought me to social ecology intellectually. Also, maybe this helps, and then I stop the introductions and I move on. I had done more scientific work, so this is not attached to social environmental movements. On the forestry sector, I'd worked on the large forestry, integrated forestry companies in Quebec, tried to understand them economically as an economist. So I kind of had these ideas. So this is gonna go really quickly because Anke really did good. So I'm just gonna maybe highlight what I see from my background as a political economist and as a sociologist looking at this approach. So I want to explain, but I'll just say, for me, this is more significant. And then I'll focus on 3, 4, and 5. And so what is setting apart maybe what I'm doing is that and it's based on this book that just came out this winter. It's trying to look how capital is intertwined with metabolism. That's what I'm interested in. Capital accumulation, and I'll get back to that, what I mean by capital. So, that's what the whole looks like now. I got a picture from this year. So that's the village that you saw in the movie, and there used to be a neighborhood here, and that's how deep the hole is after 10 years. So, and this is all for gold, yeah. So, social ecology, introductory remarks. Well, I'm going to go quickly over this, but I take it literally as the ecological relations of society. I think that's what we have to do that. I don't think that as human beings we have ecological relations. I think it's through social forms. That's the sociologist talking. So for me, social metabolism is not a metaphor. Our human metabolism is mediated by social structures. It's a real form for me. It's not just a metaphor. And then you can do it in two ways, and we're going to talk a lot about this, but we should eventually get back to this good old way of doing it, which is, so this is looking at our relation to habitats, to our habitat, but we could also look at our relation to other living beings, and to how we fit into ecosystems. And this would be doing, synecology, what they used to call back in the old days. And the concept that was used in social ecology to do this is colonization, how we colonize ecosystems, just like other living beings would colonize an ecosystem, and that has implications. But I won't get into that. We had a definition. I don't think it's really important to detail this again, except for one thing. In modern societies, it's the institutions of the economic process that govern a great part of the throughput. of the linear throughput. So our social metabolism is mediated by our economic institutions and social relations. And I use one concept that is not used by the Vienna people that much, but I've found it very intuitive as a sociologist. I call it throughput. So we have inputs, we have outputs, but we have what goes through. And there's this idea as an economist, you're always, what's the output and the why, right? And the why gives you happiness, the why gives you health, the why gives you future productivity. Well, behind the why, and that's what Enke was showing, there's the throughput, which is much larger, dirtier, and we have it here actually. And you can go and have fun on the UNEP's website where you can do your own, this is for the world, but you could do it for countries. And then all the variables that we use in metabolic analysis, you can make your own, crunch your own data. The only thing is you're constrained, you stop in 217. It's not, hasn't been updated, and that's an issue. But that's, so we work with these four primary material categories, which for us are kind of the basic building blocks of a modern capitalist society. Non-metallic minerals, what we're sitting in, basically, what we're standing on, which is cement. Biomass, so you look outside, you see it. Fossil fuels, which is energizing a lot of what's going on in society. And metallic ores, which is really this, as Enke wrote in a paper, the skeleton, the bones of the system of a modern. And you can see some, just by looking at this graph, right away you learn a lot. You learn that most of what we extract is non-metallic materials. Now remember when you were coming by bus, if you came from France, you saw the quarries, and they're huge as you come up to Modane. We need these quarries to have this. And to get the quarries, then you need the fossil fuels and the metals, because to access stone without hewing it by hand with a pick and a hammer and muscle power, which is what humanity did from minus 7,000 to around 1900. You saw the miners, they were still working with their hands, though they had machines, they had steel. But to access in a modern advanced capitalist society, all this massive material out of which our societies are built, you need this and this. This is central. They come together as an interdependent whole. And this is important, it's what's in red. The scale and the composition of the throughput determines the ecological pressures and impacts of the metabolism of society on both ecosystems and, because we have global impact, biogeochemical cycles. So it's really important to understand these material determinants. That's the way I do it in my book. It's kind of very intuitive. Extraction, throughput, flow, dissipation, and what's being extracted, energy and matter. For me, it's important to highlight that what is flowing has a social form, not only a material form, and it performs biophysical work, and I'll get to this. Joanne talked a lot about entropy. I have a small graph on entropy to build on this idea from Jessica Hogan and your own work on this. So in the categories of the UNEP accounting, this is what it looks like: material extraction, material consumption, processed output, and sink. I'm not going to go over this, but it's just that it's interesting to see that material, though it stays the same, maybe materially, changes form socially. It has an extractive form, as Enke was saying, we take out 1% copper ore. It has a functional form. Well, we don't want copper, I don't want to eat copper. I want food, I want feed for the animals that I want to put to work or that I want to eat. I want energy carriers so that it can energize the things that are around me. I want dissipative materials like fertilizer so I can grow the crops I want to grow. And I want bricks, mortar, cement, steel rods. That's what I want. So these are use value forms in the Marxian, or metabolic functional forms. I don't want this. Or if I want this, I'm a trader. I'm making money off people's need of having this. And at the other end, we end up with these also are social forms. Which are waste forms. So, all right, entropy happens. This is important. In a capitalist society, we put labor to work to extract value from labor. Well, you can't have value without entropy. This is basically Jessica Hogan's idea. But value is not entropy. That's the mistake that a lot of people make. They think, well, then we can measure. No, it's two different axes. So you have, in a capitalist society, you have a capitalist impossibility. You can't have entropic transformations without some form of valorization. And you can't have value, even though Bezos tries to convince us of this. And all these, dematerialized people try to convince us that we can have value without entropy. No, you can't. They come together. So this is, I think, an important thing. And this is specific to a fossil industrial society. And Anke showed us really well this idea. Why? Because in an agrarian society, entropy is not as much a problem because you have negentropy from ecological processes. The sun is always giving us this energy that is being transformed by biological and ecological processes. And in ecological systems, materials cycle for a very long time. And maybe just one, I want just to talk about this here. This is more of an economic. In an agrarian society, the surplus must be produced. You sow and you wait. You wait for a year, you wait for 6 months, you wait for 4 months. And then the surplus appears in the form of the harvest. In a fossil society, the oil is under the soil. You just have to get to it. Once it's there, you can use it immediately. And often the problem with fossil fuels, especially with the more liquid and gaseous forms, not coal, but with oil and gas, which is really at the core of our metabolism, is that it comes out too fast. And the problem for a capitalist is to slow down the flow, because if he lets it just go, it's just going to all spew out in one shot. And this is not only material, it's also social. The way the oil industry is organized is to slow down and oligopolize the supply of oil and gas. Because if everybody sells their oil and gas at the same time, then we get just too much and we just waste it. So the surplus is already there. And the problem in a fossil society is how to absorb it as much as you can without wasting it. That's why entropy is a big issue in these societies. And also, this is important, the dominant form of work changes radically. In an agrarian society, muscles are being mobilized to access resources. In a fossil society, you have prime movers all over the place, like this thing here projecting that there, and these prime movers mediate human activity. So the world is upside down. The machines are first and we come after. Whereas in this world, and so in this world, if you want to access geological resources like rocks or ores, you need a lot of biomass. And you need a lot of land to generate the biomass, to feed the animals and the humans to get to the ore. In this world, the ore gets you access to the ore. It's another, so the surplus form is radically different. And if you read the book, you can get into the long argument about this. So this is where I wanted to get. This is where I'm maybe more, my timer disappears all the time on my phone. I hate that. Okay, 10:46, good. So when I was trained with Boyer and with Sandrine, when we were working, we worked with an economic process that was just P and C. We had production and consumption, and we had this really neat little circle here, right? So you'd produce an output, the output would be absorbed by the households, and the households then magically would transform this output into productive factors, land, labor, and capital, which would then be sold on the factors market, and then it would be magically transformed by businesses, which would then give us the output, and this merry-go-round, as Johan said, would go on forever. And if you take a metabolic perspective on the economy, you have to open up to D and E. So an economy in a material perspective is extraction, and then you have productive transformation, and then you have consumptive transformation, and then you have dissipation. These four relations are significant, and the problem is in most economic theories, we have reduced the D and the E to functional requirements of what's happening in P and C. So we think that we extract because there is demand for materials. And we think we dissipate because there is demand for waste management. And I'll give you one example at the other end to show you that this is not true. The first incinerator in North America that was constructed in New Jersey was constructed right in front of New York City, and it was supposed to treat industrial wastes from the industries and this is like beginning 20th century. And this is from Susan Strasser. She's not the first, but it's important to acknowledge it's her really good work as a feminist historian in Waste and Want. It's a really beautiful book that everybody should read. So Susan explains that, well, this incinerator is built up and the industrial waste doesn't arrive. And it's a private sector thing, right? It's capitalists getting together and putting this, and basically building something that has to be, it has to work for at least 30 years to get into the money. Right? So it's sunk capital. This is an important concept I'll be using in all my examples. So they sink capital into material form, it's a stock, and they say, well, now we need flows to make our money and to have it work. The problem is the industries don't want to send their waste to the incinerator. They don't want to pay to send their waste to the incinerator. So you've got an incinerator sitting there doing nothing. What do? They don't demolish it. They go to New York City and they lobby. And then New York City passes a law saying, from now on, no more informal garbage collection in New York. All of these informal networks of the bone collectors, the biomass collectors, the paper collectors, the cloth collectors, dead, over. We collect everything in one bin and we send it to the incinerator and we burn it. So there was no demand for incineration. The demand was created by capitalist processes. So there's an autonomy, and I could do the same argument with CCUS. There's no demand for CCUS, but we're creating CCUS facilities. There's no demand in Quebec for pardon me?
Don't use unexplained acronyms.
Oh, sorry, yeah, it's come from North America, it's such a big thing. Carbon capture, use, and storage. The use is important. Usually we say CCS. CCS doesn't exist that much. CCS is carbon capture and storage, so you take carbon from industrial processes, you treat it, and then some form of can, you put it in and put a lid on the can. Usually it's a geological formation that you put it in and hope nobody opens the plug and sends it all up. CCUS is before you do that, you use it at least once in an industrial processes. The best use you can make of CO2 is you pump it into oil wells. These old oil wells you've almost abandoned, but you say there's still something at the bottom that I can't get to. So by pumping the CO2 into it, you lift the oil back up and then you can extract it. That's CCUS, so it's a use. So I'm just, sorry about that. Thank you, Wolfgang. Where was I? Okay, yeah, there is no demand. I was going to say another example, but I'll just move on. So what I'm trying to do in my research is to try to understand the way capital accumulates at these points, extraction and dissipation, and exerts causality on the economic process. And I'm not the first to do that, and they're actually, so then we end up with an economy that looks like this, right? And let's say in the background of this is this graphic of value and entropy, right? So it's not calculated, but it's a good metaphor to think about this. So this is what an economy really looks like. And anybody that only works at this level is missing out on essential determinations. Now, two other important things. Extraction, this idea of sources here. Sources don't exist in and of themselves. They exist because we have modes of extraction. So it's always the mode of extraction that creates the natural resource that then becomes a natural resource. If you look at mining operations, they usually they usually mine 4 or 5 minerals at the same time. But they'll take one and the rest goes to the tailings. And it depends on the economic cycle. So sometimes they'll use more of one substance, sometimes they won't use it. So it's very variable what a source is. But sources and sinks, which extraction and dissipation are the frontiers that organize the relationship with ecosystems and biogeochemical cycles. So these are our interfaces with nature, if we want to use that word, dissipation and extraction. And that's what I tried to explain in the book. So then, this is what does a capitalist economic process look like? Well, it has 3 important stages. You start by creating value between extraction and production. That's where most of the value in our economic system is created. This implies entropy, obviously, but it also creates value. And then from production to consumption, you just realize the value, which is demand. And this is very important because if things stay stuck here, well, then you have everything rotting in the warehouses. So you need the absorption of the throughput at the point of consumption. And for capitalism, this has always been a problem. How do you ensure that you have the capacity, the economic and social capacity to absorb everything that is produced economically? And to say it, let's say, in a maybe non-scientific way, well, since the 1920s, we've become very good at mass consuming what we mass produce, or to say it more, let's say, edgier, at over-consuming what we overproduce. And this overconsumption is not because we're gluttonous or because we're greedy. It's because the form of the use values that we're given to consume are made to be wasted, right? Most of it is designed to break, designed to... So then the third process, so realization is basically demand, and a lot of capital goes here. And then finally, the capitalist waste process. Waste is not a natural biophysical category. Waste is the social decision that a material form has to be discarded. Waste can be built in, so this thing at one point I won't be able to upgrade it, upload it, I'll just have to it'll be unfunctional. So it can be built in, or it can be exogenous, because everybody else says, yeah, but you still have this old phone, you should, Eric, new phones now, why you, stop resisting against modernity and, upgrade. Okay, that's exogenous, right? Social peer. But waste is, in our economies, is often not, because the thing is actually physically used up. It is often more to do with social processes. So here we have three important components of our economic process, where we have this intermingling between biophysical and material stocks. I'll leave that. We know they exist. It's the most important thing, and we know that I want to comment that graph from Kaufman, or unless you're doing it tomorrow, Helmut?
In a different form.
Okay, so then I won't even talk about it. I'll leave it to you. But what's important for me is, we know stocks command flows, of course, but stocks in society exist through social relations. And the dominant social relation that organizes the existence of stocks is property. And there are four, let's say, basic forms of property that we can talk about. We have commoning forms of property, which are non-exclusive, which imply the community, which can take different forms, a trust. You can have informal commons. You can have formalized commons through the trust form. But the other ones are the ones that we're more familiar with, private property, which can be corporate, which means that some stocks, like I would say this one, this and that, this one, are assets that have value and that belong to corporations that want to protect the value of these assets. And then we have consumptive property, right? We have property like our toothbrushes, our phones, our cars, our toilet bowls, our homes. And some of these also are capitalized and are enmeshed in financial relations. And this also has lock-in effects. And this also impacts the way the throughput will be commanded by these stocks. Think of homes and think of what's happening in North America still today. But what led up to the 2008 crisis, this huge accumulation of materials to build up speculatively all these homes. So it's important to not only see the biophysical aspect of it, but look at the capitalist or the social relations behind. And I do this by using something that Helmut developed with the other people at SEC, but it's because you're the first author in this paper, but also with Planck, is a nexus to say that in our fossil societies, any form of social practice is mediated by material stocks and by material and energy flows. But, and this is important for the type of analysis we do, any flow, anytime you're looking at a flow, you're studying oil, you're studying biomass, I work on biomethane, you have to understand what are the practices behind this flow and what are the stocks. You can't have one corner of this triangle without the two others. They always are together and they always mediate each other. So this is a powerful analytical model. And I'll use it now rapidly for capital. So, for example, valorization, which I was talking about earlier, right? When we're producing stuff in a factory, in a mine, well, you have investment into the stocks, which then appears fixed capital. Long-lived, 30, 40-year fixed capital that you want to protect against competition. And this means that the flow that is going through, well, it's going to be a commodified flow. What comes out at the end will be steel rods, will be copper rods, copper wire. I'm in the extractive sector a bit. And the relationship is one of property and investment. And I'll get back to investment. But you can look at the same thing. We're looking at this copper factory, copper mine, and we look at it through the labor process view. And what do we see? We see employment, and we see means of productions that are energized, and we see a flow of use values. And it's the same reality. And here we have a lock-in through property, but here you'll get the lock-in through employment. The miners will not want you to shut down their mine. It's their jobs. So this is an example of how you can use the stock flow practice nexus to look at concretely lock-ins that we have in our societies. To always remember that a lock-in has 3 points. It's got a social, and this can be very complex. I reduced it here, but if you go back to this graph, you have power structures, institutions, and social relations. all enmeshed in the social practices. These can be labor, care. To care, you need material flows. In our societies, we can't care without these flows, and we need material stocks. We have even dedicated stocks for care.
Over 25 minutes now.
Okay. Okay, then I just want to say, and I stop here. That's okay. So this does it here. I don't want it to stop. I wanted to have one image of social movements, how this is used. So then what I basically, when I do research is I take this corner and I look at extraction, production, consumption, and dissipation. And I look at the stock flows practice nexus in each corner. Now I can skip to the end. So what does this mean? And I stop. So this is energy, right? Anybody know what energy this is and what the energy is? Pardon me?
Bioenergy?
Yeah, but what form? Where's the bioenergy in there? No. Anybody else want to try?
Biomass? No?
Yeah, tree biomass. So what is the biomass that is energetic? Where is it?
God?
Yeah, but no, it's still there. It's still there. It's still there. Pardon me? It's all here. All the energy's here. It's all the waste. And that's what we want to extract to make biogas. Now, this is the new extractive frontier. We cut the trees, we make houses, or we make paper, but then we have all this biomass that usually goes to the soil, and we extract it out, and then we can make renewable natural gas. So this is a big issue in Quebec. We're starting to have struggles around this with our movements because the gas companies tells us this as the origin of their renewable natural gas, food waste, right? Now we know that food waste is going to be less than 2% of what's going to be biomethanized. 80% is going to be from the forestry sector. So then you have to sit down with social movements, and this is not me. This is one of the activists, a retired, I think she's in insurance, an ex-insurance person that drew this up on canvas. From the research that I'd done, we did a small report, and I worked with her, and I drew it by hand, and then she sat down and drew this whole graph, and then I reworked it, and so, you look at this makes sense, but when and I wanted to end with this image. So as a scientist, I helped her do this, and then I sent it to her all happy, we're like, this works from a flow perspective, and the stocks are there, and it's coherent, and it works, and then you get this, like the 2 hours later, she's, yeah, but you did that, yeah, but, so intruding in my research. But that, and we're going to talk about this afternoon, that's what, working in a transdisciplinary, she's not a material flow scientist. She's an ex-insurance salesperson. But she's been reading a lot, and she's got great suggestions, and she's always intervening. But it's just to say that material flow analysis is not only something that is useful for, and I'll get back to this graph, that is useful for analysis, it's also useful for social struggles. So we know where we have to struggle, we know what we have to highlight as problems, and we know how we can create social debates between alternative uses. And this is what this analysis gives us, so it's really useful for that in concrete struggles. Yeah. There, I'm done. Thank you.